Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 158 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. It was another shorter episode of the Secret Invasion show, 39 minutes including credits, but Dag and I talked about it for over an hour. In fact, the unedited version available on Patreon is just over 2 hours. So let's dive right in, starting with a letter again from listener Aaron on this week's episode. He wrote quite a bit, and he actually got in his comments on this week's episode rather than still talking about last week. He said, and I quote, "I'm seeing critics complain about Gravik randomly deciding that his people should mortally fear him, and that gaining Avengers powers is a better goal than starting a war, harmless to the Skrulls, so their people can live here in peace. A plan which suddenly involves killing his whole army anyway, cause he's crazy." But what I'd say to them is that the change isn't random. It isn't motivated, but it is very deliberate, because everyone working for Gravik is now sympathetic. There are no Gravik sympathizers left among the Skrulls, not even Rhodey, and they're all helpless because no one but Gravik and Gaia have superpowers, which seems like a strange oversight on his part, but whatever. He was lying to the council when he promised to empower everyone. And that's important, because we took great pains to establish that there are 1 million Skrulls living on Earth and that there's nowhere else for them to go. And definitely not that one world which Danvers herself noted had no sentient life outside of Thanos at the time. So, the status quo is going to include 1 million Skrulls, and we're never going to talk about them again. Aside from the ones out on Saber anyway, but they're all walking around there in their own skin up there. And presumably the human astronauts who were retconned into existence when that ship got an explanation in WandaVision are okay with that, because why wouldn't they be? Anyway, Gravik turning on them is what allows that to happen.
First, I think I only have one nitpick. I'm not sure when Danvers said that Thanos' planet was uninhabited. I just remember her saying that there weren't any armies or satellites or weapon caches. Like, there could have been other people, just not in visual range of Thanos.
I would have to go back and watch Endgame again, which, I'm going to get to in a few months when I'm doing that rewatch with my nieces to verify that. I would not be surprised if she didn't say no sentient life other than Thanos. And that's something that I brought up in the very first episode, was if they're looking for a planet, why not that one?
Yeah. I mean,
no,
1 million people
really
is not a lot. It's like 4 square miles of people standing arm to arm.
It's
really not a lot of people
to restart a civilization. It's definitely enough for biodiversity and to prevent inbreeding, basically.
Yeah. Biological.
But it's a small enough number that obviously they can live on another planet that is populated with sentient life and could continue on from there. And one would assume that their preference is to be on a planet that has technological infrastructure already built on it. Starting from absolute scratch, starting from square one is not ideal. especially when there's at least one known civilization that wants to exterminate you. I would
I want
like
to
to
know what
know that
happened to
as
the light
well.
ship.
There's a lot in that 1995 to 2023 that still could use some filling in there. We've gotten a couple little flashbacks in this show to fill in a couple of those gaps, but the big one feels like it's still unfulfilled.
Yeah. Trying to think of more about Aaron's comment on, Gravik's fall from grace and such. And I know that we're going to get into that when we get into that, but yeah, I have a disappointment to share
On this episode, basically.
when we get there.
Yeah, I think we're probably
Yeah.
right about on the same page.
I think this one was like
It
barely as
was
long as the
1
last
minute
one.
longer. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
let's
there we go.
get into this episode. Titled Harvest, which has been mentioned briefly in previous episodes as some sort of MacGuffin, but we don't know exactly what it is until later this episode.
Exactly. Oh man, I totally think the end is a fake out,
Yeah.
but we're not there.
No, we're at the very beginning where President Ritson is brought into the hospital by Nick. Now, he tries to tell Ritson here, the Russians weren't involved, these are only Skrulls, don't trust Rhodey, all that. But the president's unconscious at the time, so not sure what good he thinks he's doing there. At least I assume so. There might be a fake out in the next episode where the president's like, no, I heard the whole thing. Because they kind of leave that scene with Rhodey and the president on a note of what will happen next.
Very much so. It's not often anybody can get alone time with the president of the United States in real life, or
Yeah.
I would assume in the show. And I think Fury was just trying to take advantage of it in the event that Ritson was
True.
aware but unresponsive.
It makes sense in this is probably the only time you have to tell him this, but at the same time, you're talking to a man in a coma, basically.
Yeah. And in lieu of an official security force, Fury posts up right outside the door, ready to shoot anybody who is otherwise
I
not
do
him.
enjoy that moment there where he takes a chair and is just like, all right, here I am, come and get me. And there's a flash of the TV screen in that scene, and we see that the national news has footage of Skrulls at that attack.
Yep.
Word is out.
Word is
Although
out.
what that does, I think, the fact that they mention shape-shifting aliens on the news, last episode, when Nick broke into Rhodey's place and Rhodey shows him the footage of him shooting Maria and is like, we both know that's a Skrull. And he's like, is that what your defense is going to be? That, no, I'm sorry, it was a shape-shifting alien? And it's like, well, there are shape-shifting aliens on the news now. So it's a little bit better of a defense than it used to be.
And it came out before Rhodey does what he does in this episode. That's the important part, is Fury's defense is secured by virtue of being first. Just put a little caption on that scene, be like, first, like on a comment thread.
In the
eyes
meantime,
replaced by a
though,
number
we
one.
cut back to New Skrullos, where Gravik assembles the operatives.
Operatives assemble,
No,
just doesn't have the
no.
alliteration that I need.
Anyways, Pagan is not happy with Gravik. He's like, you could have killed
No.
Fury. You sent Vara after him. You knew that wasn't going to work. You had the opportunity here when we attacked the president, and you still didn't do it. What's going on? I mean, Pagan has a point. Gravik is very much in Bond villain mode at this point. If you really want to eliminate Fury, eliminate Fury. Like Scott Evil says, just shoot him in the head.
It seems to be happening a little bit often in this franchise. I mean, Pagan calls it out, but in like 5 minutes, Fury gets a chance on a big target.
That one I think is more understandable. But yeah, we can talk about that when we get there as well. And yeah, Gravik's not willing to kill Fury, but he's sure willing to kill Pagan.
He doesn't need Pagan sowing dissent. He needs to stave that off until the war starts.
I'm kind of with Aaron on this whole bit. It's like, I understand from the story point of view why they're doing this, but it doesn't seem to fit with the character that we've known up to this point.
It is consistent to me with the corruption of Extremis. That's the leap that I had to go to be like, why is Gravik acting this way now when he spent so much time trying to ingratiate himself and work amongst, the people that he was trying to lead, and now he's just killing them for speaking out mercilessly. And, Extremis had that effect of making those people super cocky. And he is a Skrull who has had his genes altered with at least 4 different species of being, Extremis being more of a DNA treatment than a human specific issue. But what's got to be going through his head
last
as
episode
this
it was a
altered
bullet.
being?
Yeah, I'm really afraid once again Marvel are going to be running into their not sticking the landing on their television shows. This is not giving me hope for episode 6.
I mean, my disappointment is valid here, so I'll just share it. But this is a narrative decision to have the show end on episode 6 and to have only an ambiguous sort of maybe following in Gravik's footsteps when it's all over, instead of, oh, they killed Gravik and now the million of us who were in love with him are going to rise up against the humans, and it would make absolute continuity sense for the next few movies to deal with these age-angry Skrulls. So yeah, Gravik just loses it here. Pagan thought he had a voice. And none of you do. You're all faceless.
And I like Beto. We haven't gotten a lot of Beto, but he's kind of been the every Skrull. He's the everyman, but he's a Skrull. So he's seeing Pagan, or he's seeing that Gravik has gone off the deep end, and he's like, okay, we're gonna need to try to do something about this. And then Gravik calls Rhodey and Frody, yes.
Frody.
And turns him against him as well, although he doesn't actually turn against him at this point. But you can tell that he's definitely questioning Gravik's choices.
Yeah, the loyalties are fraying. And I don't think Frody's operative was wholly loyal to Gravik's plan. I think Frody's operative was going along with it until it was time to be done, and is seeing the clock run out here. And going back to
so it's an interesting choice to have Frody tell the president, yes, Russians are working with the Skrulls, and bombing the Skrulls is our best next step.
Doesn't that happen after the confrontation?
Gravik is telling Rhodey to do in this scene. I mean, Rhodey was just like, well, I'm headed to the hospital to kill off the president for you. Gravik's like, no.
Yeah. Are the scrolls also his bodyguards? Because he just mentions Gravik name straight up out there. No big deal. Even though the guy whose
Yeah,
wrist Fury broke is right there. So like, is that person a scroll or not? Or is it okay to mention, hey Gravik, I'm gonna go ahead and kill the president for you in front of a Secret Service
except he
officer?
doesn't
Like, what
say
is
it
going on here?
that way. He's
No, but he
Well,
says his
okay,
name,
that's in the
friendly.
confrontation scene, and we'll get there. Here in the car, he just says, I'm going to the hospital to make sure we have a favorable outcome, which, if somebody's listening in, could mean.
No, he says, Gravik, have you lost your damn mind in the car? Yeah, I picked it up on my first watch through and I was like, what? What is
Well,
going on here? Why is the attaché to the president on a
but
casual phone
does
call with
anybody
Gravik?
in the Secret Service know the name Gravik and what it means?
That's a good question. We assume a lot of people in high places have heard the name, but maybe Rhodey's done a good
Yeah,
job
I would
of
think
keeping that on the
that
DL.
that was a need to know sort of thing. Back in episode 2, before we knew that Rhodey was a Skrull, we were told that he was given a top secret, eyes only briefing on Skrulls. So I would think that very few people in the government outside of certain military leaders, espionage people, spy organization heads, those kind of people know that the Skrulls exist, but even your average Secret Service agent wouldn't be privy to that information. So to them, the name Gravik is just an odd sounding name that doesn't necessarily mean anything. And then we do get the
Fair.
standoff, where Gravik's name is mentioned a couple more times.
And Rhodey, wow, ho ha, hee
I
ha
assume it
ho.
was this scene that you're talking about where Fury has the drop on somebody and you think, why didn't he kill him?
Yes, yes. That whole conversation meant nothing. He didn't get any intel out of it, and all it was threat boasting. Would have been way easier for him to just shoot him and deal with the fallout. Shoot him, drop the gun, put his hands up, let the Secret Service agent point at him, and then like he's a scroll, look at him, he's scrolling, and have the Secret Service agent either reveal himself and Fury's fucked, or there's a change in tide there, and Fury ends up heading up the defense of the president. Which angle I was hoping for was Fury steps back into the game flawlessly. It's episode 5. Yeah, it's the beginning of episode 5, but I'm kind of hoping for like the 2-part arc that shows are doing in their limited
I
runs
can
like
understand
this.
his
But yeah,
decision not to shoot Rhodey at this point because he is surrounded by Secret Service who have their guns trained on him. As soon as one shot is fired, many, many more shots will be fired. I don't think the Secret Service are going to stop, wait for the body to fall, and see that it's a Skrull before they say, okay, he just took out the top military aide to the president. He's going down now. And like Rhodey says, Fury is not ready to die yet. But Rhodey, we find out, has released the footage of Nick killing Maria. I find it a little bit funny that all of these episodes, anytime they show that footage, Colby Smulders gets a special guest star credit at the end of the episode. It's like, okay, but she didn't show up at all for filming this episode. You're just using footage from 3 episodes ago. But I guess that's probably in her contract. So good for her. Still just kind of funny that she's getting credited for basically archival footage.
yeah. Well, we're in the middle of a strike.
That's
Those
true.
residuals need to come in.
Now, for a short episode, it was a long opening because it's after all of this that we finally get the opening credits. Yeah,
Yep.
interesting
6.5
decision
minutes
there.
in.
And then after our AI cartoon credits, we get our favorite character of the show. At least my favorite character of the show besides Fury himself. Sonia is here to confront Director Weatherston, who is himself a Skrull. This is probably my favorite scene. One of my favorite scenes in this episode are all the scenes with Sonya. She just brings so much fun to what she's doing in this role that I love watching her on screen doing this. I was surprised at how short the director's scene was, considering, again, who the actor is.
I am continually impressed by this actress's ability to hold all the cards in every scene she's in. She knows everything about everybody every time, and she has a fallback for every situation that she can't handle, and she's extraordinarily charismatic and just completely comes off as totally nonchalant. But when your, director of the SIS shows up with their hands behind their back, you need to be peeing your pants. You need to be pushing buttons underneath that desk.
Security.
You need to be, calling people. It's 2026. They've got tech. You need a personal shield around you. Yeah. It's just not okay. And her words here is like, we have no official policy on killing Skrulls, so would you like me to enact my personal preference? Like, okay, holy smokes, you got all the lines that I wanted Nick Fury to have, and I love it.
If she could be our next Nick after Samuel L. Jackson decides that he no longer wants to do the role. So, yeah, she's the same age as I am, basically. She's 49. So she could step in as the new head spy for some sort of global agency and be in that role for a little while, which I would be very happy with. I am loving her in this role and would be very glad to see her continue throughout the MCU.
Yeah, I very much would too. We need another tour de force super spy.
Nick is obviously, maybe at the end he's somewhat back to where he was, but I don't think he's quite there yet. And Everett Ross, he's decent, but I wouldn't call him like a big spy master like Nick has been.
Remind me, did we confirm Ross for Armor Wars? Because he dead. Whether a Skrull killed him or somebody else. Right now, all we know is that he could be dead.
I'm pretty sure he's going to be in Thunderbolts.
That was maybe the production I would misremember.
He's not listed on the credits for Thunderbolts yet, but I could have sworn he was in there. But maybe not. I guess we'll have to find out. But I just don't think that they killed Ross that way. I don't think that Skrull is the only Ross we've met. And so I have to assume that there's an Everett Ross in a fracking pod somewhere that's going to be rescued at the end of this show.
If so, it was probably filmed when they still had
assume that
Everett.
They kept Martin Freeman around for an extra day to film the "hey, thanks for getting me out" scene. But getting back to this episode, we have Beto confronting Gravik. And there's a weird cut in that scene where they cut to a bunch of people watching them talk. That didn't feel like it fit into the rest of the scene. I'm wondering what that was about.
Maybe a pickup shot to show that there are a number of people there for this subsequent
Yeah,
fight
but
that's about to break
the
out.
number of people that they show there is way more than are in the fight. So it was just weird. Watching it the first time, I was like, oh, they're just watching Gravik. They're enthralled by their cult leader. But then watching it the second and the third time, it was like, well, that doesn't quite fit, because you would think if they were all like devoted to Gravik, then they would have tried to step in and stop the attack. And instead, Beto has a few people helping him. I don't know. It was a weird little cut that didn't seem to make sense to me.
Yeah, it does look awkward. Like
Yeah,
everyone's staring at them. Like this conversation is pivotal in the history of the universe. They're all time travelers here to witness the fall of Gravik.
except Gravik doesn't fall here, even though he's outnumbered.
Oh,
Well,
he
yes,
falls.
he falls,
He
but
falls
he
in the
is
way that's
not
important.
defeated in battle by any stretch of the imagination. Beto and friends get the drop on him, and things seem to be going their way at first, but then Super Skrull kicks in, and he just takes them all out.
Yeah, there's that
Yeah,
extremis wrath. But I also felt like All Obsidian's strength in those hits. They were tuned with a bit more
yeah.
bass
They
than I'm used to for a
Groot
regular
has
fight.
definitely been shown off, and Extremis has definitely been shown off, but we haven't seen anything that is like definitively, ooh, Frost Beast DNA or ooh, Cull Obsidian DNA. But yeah, his punches at the end there, I could see that being from Cull Obsidian possibly. And he throws Beto outside and slits his throat.
Yeah, it is absolutely wild here. It's
Yeah,
completely
he has
off the
definitely
train.
lost his discipline. He is no longer in control. And once again, we cut away from Gravik back to our main character here, returning to the, what would you call that? Like community center or.
Yeah, and he tells a story about
Mm-hmm.
it that I found really nice, that it became a refuge for people who had been oppressed in the past, and it has that poetry of
Yeah,
having
the
intended to have
West
been another one.
Indies immigrants came to England after World War II and kind of took the part of town that had been absolutely destroyed, rebuilt it, and built Brixton back up. And he wanted that to be the place for the scrolls, but it doesn't seem like this place has been used a lot recently. I like the little touch of the scotch tape on the door. Did you catch that? Oh, when
I did
he
not.
opens the door, if you look up at the top of the doorway, there's a piece of tape, and it's obviously just kind of hanging loose, which means the door has already been opened once before. He sees that, and that's when he pulls his gun out.
Interesting. Good call. Tape being just a
Mm-hmm.
really cheap and easy
Not an anti-theft device,
anti-theft
but
device
an indicator of
indicator.
when somebody has come into the place. If you're not looking for it, it's hard to notice. But I saw him look up, and I looked at the archway, the top of the doorway, and was like, oh yeah, there's a piece of tape hanging down there. So yeah, Gaia is
Mm-hmm.
there, and Fury tries to be like, Talos died, a good, and she's like, whoa, 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 don't care. He died. That's all that's important. It's a powerful emotional scene for Amelia Clark here. I think she did a really good job with. You can see her frustration.
She's definitely playing a character that's like grappling with a lot of emotional turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
Her father is dead. His vision is dead. but I didn't really agree with his vision. I kind of have my own thing going. And does my father's death free me up to pursue that? Or do I owe something to what
Yeah.
his ideas were? But she's still, telling Nick, like,
Unlike
I'm going to
Talos, who
walk my own
chose the path
path.
of struggle. I like that line from Nick. He
Well,
didn't
yeah,
lose. He chose the path of struggle.
reminds me of him telling that story about his grandfather who would walk back and forth with a brown
Mm,
paper bag that had a gun in it. Path of struggle. I'm going to be in my neighborhood. Hopefully, I never
yeah.
have to use it.
Now,
I'm always going to be
surprisingly,
ready.
or at least to me, because like I said last episode, I thought we were kind of done with Priscilla, but Nick sends Gaia over to her for help with the burial ceremony, while Nick is off to Finland.
She says something at the end here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put on a good face. There,
Yeah,
shapeshifter. You
I
can
mean,
actually
I
do
think
that.
that felt like
So
a little bit of a quip to me there.
it makes me feel like we're not done with Ben
Hmm.
Mendelsohn
Okay.
and Kobe Smulders. Two people that are dead. If she shows up as
Right.
Talos in his human form, that would really throw off Gravik's forces, the people who are still loyal to Gravik. If she shows up as Maria Hill, it totally exonerates Nick Fury. She's not dead. She was
Well,
undercover the whole time.
then what was the body we spent all that time bringing back from Russia?
It's still, I mean, yes, it's Maria Hill, but chances are the news coverage is going to be like Maria Hill and Nick Fury took out blah 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 blah, and maybe Gaia dies and Maria has a heroic death. I don't know. It just seems like with shapeshifters abound, and one of them at least definitely closer to
Mm-hmm.
our side than the other. There's an opportunity there to use some shapeshiftery to make amends to
Yeah.
things that are
Well,
standing
we've
out
got
right now.
one more episode for them to do that. But back to my new favorite, Sonia.
Absolutely.
Quoting one of my favorite comedians, Miss Izzard, with cake or death.
Cake or death. Yeah. Big fan
Yes.
of
I've
Miss
forgotten.
Izzard.
Has she changed her first name? Okay. Susie
Susie.
Izzard.
I remember there was an interview and she talked about it. She also mentioned that like she's fine going by everything,
Okay.
but
Yeah,
that's
I
who she
just
is
didn't
now.
want to dead name
Mhm.
her.
I get so weirded out because like she came out on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm like, I have my own personal like
Yeah.
withholdings on Joe Rogan. So like how did
Yeah,
that
I
work
don't
well?
watch/listen to him, so
I haven't watched Joe
uh,
Rogan since Fear
news
Factor.
radio was the last time I.
Oh, news radio. Wow. What was that?
Oh,
Wasn't
it
that
was a
like a
great
90s
90s
sitcom?
sitcom. Dave Foley, Stephen
Huh.
Root, Phil Hartman.
Yeah. Phil
Yeah,
Hartman
well,
before the end, of
he
course.
unfortunately passed near the end of the show's run, but before it had ended. And John Lovitz came
Yeah.
in and played a friend of his who basically took his position in the station. Of course, it didn't work as well as the original, and so it was canceled the next season. But yeah, no, news
Yeah.
radio, definitely go check out the early seasons. But unfortunately, helped bring Joe Rogan to fame and fortune.
I didn't even know he was
Yeah.
on that show.
So anyway, Sonia interrogating the Daltons, and she found the Super Scroll blueprint.
And she just
Oh,
steals the
absolutely.
show
I
again.
love her here and how she deals with the Daltons. Obviously, Rosa's in charge of the pair. And Sonia knows that because she's like, no, you shut up. I'm talking to her.
Yeah. And just such a affable threat. I'm very good at being your bestie. I'm very good at being
Yes.
not your bestie. It's just it's, I want to use
I
that at
want
some point in the
her
future.
and Yelena to get together. Uh, they both have that we're on the opposite side, but I'm gonna make you love me anyways vibe to them. So seeing the two of them against each other would be, I think, hilarious. Just
just
wonderful.
just imagine a dialogue
Exactly.
between the two of them where yeah, I don't like you very much. Oh, good. Now that we've had that figured out, can we get on the way? And then at some point later, it's something like, no, no, I'll get it. I'll get it. Superhero landing and everything. And then, the end is like, you absolutely nailed that superhero landing. Do you need a salon piss? Just the back,
Yeah.
cream for pain. She's all
Even
smile.
as she's
She's
burning
in
down the
control
lab.
100%.
So obviously Skrulls
Yeah.
have a certain amount of super strength here because I assume that Victor is not a super Skrull, but he breaks the handcuffs with no problem and takes Rosa hostage, which is an interesting choice. I'm taking my wife hostage. She's also a Skrull. I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to kill her, why you wouldn't want to not kill her also, but this is what is what I've got left. But Sonya has it just in the bag, just takes him out point blank, one shot. Oh, and her line here of, oh, you're just like the men in my species. Constantly threatening death if you're not gaslighting us. Damn.
Yeah. Well, and the other interesting bit here is they had to get a red shirt
Yeah.
to get throat chopped. You couldn't have Nigel. Nigel's way too lovable. I love the split second CG that shows, and this is kind of gruesome, that shows the blood exiting his forehead and turning
Yeah,
purple
the
as it
splash
does.
on Dr. Rosa's head there is a nice purple brain mess.
Oh,
Unfortunately, that's the last we see of Sonya for a little while, because we do get Gaia and Priscilla meeting back up with one another, probably for the first time in years, because Priscilla doesn't seem to recognize Gaia. She has to say, "No, I'm Gaia. Fury sent me to help bury my father. Said you could do that."
Yeah. But the tension is there even
Oh,
before
yeah.
she opens this door. She knocks and she waits about as long as my UPS driver before she tries to force
Does your
her way
UPS
in.
driver try to force his way in?
Only the one time, but he hit the
Good.
brakes, fortunately.
Yeah, UPS drivers are usually like, bye.
Yeah. Ding dong, bye.
Play ding dong ditch with a note on the door that says, "We tried to deliver." Bullshit.
We failed. This is failed.
All these scenes everything's just really short, cut little scenes. We're constantly like going back and forth between like, okay, now we're with Guy and Priscilla. Now we're with Rhodey and Ritson. Now we're with Gravik calling Fury. All of these scenes are just really short, so I don't feel like I have a lot to add on them. But I do enjoy Guy and Priscilla together. You can see where they're similar in certain ways, but Priscilla has the wisdom of age. Sure, you can make fun of me all you want, but wait till you're where I am before you judge me. But like I said, very quick scene, and now we're to Rhodey and Ritson. So Do you think Ritson heard Fury? Okay.
Yes. I think it's the only reason
All
Fury
right.
didn't shoot Rhodey. Just from a writer's and a narrative perspective, if you were convinced that the president didn't hear you, didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand, wasn't aware, you wouldn't let the worst mole in the history of the United States continue to spew into
Okay.
that person's ear.
But
So I'm just convinced from a writer's perspective, it's sort of a meta. Yeah, I think that it doesn't really make sense from a continuity perspective, but from a writing perspective, the only reason to leave Rhodey alive is to boost this
yeah.
drama for the audience to see this interaction and then have Ritson go, no,
Yeah,
Fury told me the whole
and
time, I'm good.
that's the biggest problem with this episode is that a lot of times, or at least a few times, we're seeing the writers' motivations rather than the characters. You can see the machinery behind the scenes of them going, okay, well, we have to get this to here and we want this to here, so this is how we're doing it, even if it doesn't make sense. That's unfortunate because for the most part I'm still enjoying the show, but there's just that ricketiness to the writing in this episode that is making me really worried about them sticking the landing.
Yeah, they're making some narrative mistakes that are fairly easy to point out when you're familiar with how narratives are trying to build drama
Mm-hmm.
for a big finale. They made Gravik all alone. They have presented Fury with some more allies who haven't really given us a really good reason why they're his allies. I mean, he's even able to sequester a plane. Like, he is the most wanted man on the planet, and he's got a contact who will get him a plane.
I'll get to that contact in a second because he is a returning character.
I thought so too. And yeah, when we get there, I'm gonna write it down on a notepad and see if I'm right because I didn't look
Okay.
it up intentionally.
But in the scene with Rhodey and Ritson, there was a couplet here that I noted particularly where Ritson, says, a strike on Russian soil, that will mean World War III. And Rhodey says, I'd rather face a war than extinction. Wouldn't World War III be an extinction event?
I mean, if Gravik's plan goes off, it's extinction of the
Well,
Skrulls, basically.
He's
killing his own
okay.
allies.
He's killing, like we said in the early episodes, there's like 500 people at that base. There's 1 million Skrulls on Earth. Yes, he is killing some of his own people. And probably if other Skrulls find out that he arranged that, he will have basically a civil war on his hand. But even if the president goes through with this plan and strikes that base and takes it out, it's not wiping out all of the Skrulls on Earth. Not even close.
Okay. That's fair.
But World War III between the US and Russia is going to be a nuclear war if it happens. And the president has to know that. And it would be an extinction event. It would not be like the war in Ukraine or even World War II. Somebody's going to push a button and wipe the species off the face of the planet, basically. So Frody's line of I'd rather face a war than extinction to me rings false and should to the president as well.
Definitely a false dichotomy. Our options are not war or extinction. There's a path to peace.
The choices you're giving me are extinction or extinction. The two options that Rhodey is actually presenting is war, which is extinction, or the Skrulls take over and extinction. But yes, a third option can be found. In the meantime, Gravik is calling Fury and wants the harvest in order to prevent this war.
Yep.
All right, so we're to Fury on the private jet. What does your notepad say?
Show it to the camera.
It says Black Widow, and yes, this is Rick Mason, who appeared in the Black Widow movie and was basically her go-to guy for equipment or travel or anything of that nature. And so to me it makes perfect sense that Nick would also have that contact and would be able to call it in.
I'm all about Shield having this secret stash of logistics gurus who, even when they leaked Shield's files to everybody, there were files that just weren't leaked or maybe even weren't maintained, just super secret contacts underground for if Shield goes under, these are the people who are still keeping the supply chain flowing, the money flowing, the identities and the tech flowing. But there's a major, what should I say? Maybe an Easter egg in this scene that led me to his identity.
What was that?
He was wearing a black ball cap with a blood red B on it.
Interesting.
The closest we're gonna get to, a Black Widow reference. Black outfit, red.
Yeah.
With red highlights. So that was where I was going with that.
I just remembered him because he was fun in that movie. His interactions with Natasha were enjoyable, and he has that same kind of attitude here of, I'm just going to tell you what I think, and I don't care if you disagree with me, but I think you're making a mistake here. You should be mothballed just like the helicarrier. Gives them all the paperwork and stuff, and Fury's just like, yeah, and you're welcome.
Get some nappies, old man. It's a long flight. Fury scowls at him and then goes to sleep.
How long a flight is that from London to Finland?
I got the impression it was about 10 hours.
Non-stop from London to Helsinki is only 3 hours.
Well, I guess it's a 2-hour flight.
2 hour, 50-minute. So we get Gaia and Priscilla. Very Viking funeral here for Talos. Emilia Clarke apparently has lots of practice speaking foreign languages, made up languages, because she gives the scroll goodbye to her father here. Priscilla does the prayer, but Gaia gives the farewell on your journey or whatever she said in Skrullish. I know she's very practiced in Dothraki. Is that the name of the?
It is.
Okay, I got it.
But addition to that, she probably spoke High Valyrian and many of the other languages of her upbringing.
Yeah. So yeah, after the funeral, Vara and Gaia kind of commiserate together, and we find out that Vara bought the house even before she and Fury were. I couldn't tell if it was before they were together or just they were already together and she hoped Fury would like it or something along those lines. But she bought the house before Nick ever saw it and just had Nick in mind when she got it.
Yeah, I got the impression that her and Nick had been on again, off again until that time. And it was after the events of Avengers that put something into focus for him that made him pursue Priscilla finally at last.
I could see that. We don't get that stated for sure. That's purely headcanon on our part, but it makes sense. And I enjoy the bit here where Gaia asks if Fury ever watched Vara in her own skin. And the reaction from Vara here is like, no, we don't ask that kind of question in public. That is personal business. Apparently there are Skrull etiquette rules, and Gaia does not care about them.
Yeah, I can see why. It's not like etiquette found them a planet. I think she's in the true mindset for Skrull freedom. Like, Talos was an optimistic. He has a very cloudy past. He was a general. He may have been the warlord, a warlord at one point. we haven't really figured out, like, did the scrolls, we haven't really explicitly said on screen, did the scrolls start the fight with the Kree? But that's where I'm leaning.
Yeah, me too.
And they lost that war because obviously they're an endangered species now because there's only 1 million of them.
Yeah.
Gravik was the embittered would-be savior burned by his own ambition. And Gaia is like, I have no time for scroll tradition or anything because we need a freaking house, people. Come on,
Yeah.
get it together.
Yeah.
We're not going to make it through this by clinging to the old ways, and we're not going to make it through that by, warmongering this. We need a planet. We need to get serious about finding one. Let's go.
Yeah. Talos was too idealistic. Gravik is too bitter. And Gaia is walking that line between them. Good call on your part.
Oh, this scene. Like, I don't even want to play the rest of this scene because I'm like, my ears.
Yeah. I've mentioned before, I watched the episodes 3 times before we have our conversation. And 2 of those 3 times, the first 2 times, that gunshot got me. I jumped.
Yeah, the first time, the rear speaker on my sound stuff in the ceiling is like a foot behind me and about 6 feet up from where I'm sitting, from where my head location is. And so I think I was distracted because I was talking to Cal about something, and then it happened, and I just like gripped the side of my chair and like froze for a minute before I realized it's on TV and I'm okay.
Okay, I wasn't shot. Cal wasn't shot.
The quality,
we're all okay here.
The quality of sound that came through was sufficient to immerse me very deeply.
Yeah.
There's a snide remark that she makes before it all goes down. How often did you get to be in your own skin around him? Right. You love him so much. Did he love you back? Because she's talking about seeing him read a book, and how often did he watch you in your own skin? I appreciate it because it definitely puts you in Gaia's mindset. She's very much mutant and proud, if I were to steal that from Mystique. And we know that Priscilla's relationship, both with herself and with Nick, is complicated, but her true visage did not stand in the way of her affection for him.
Right.
And, we can't really, I think it's fair to say we can't really judge people for the sacrifices they choose to make in favor of their relationships, even if we really disagree with them, like on a visceral level. That's their relationship. It's not hurting anybody. They didn't mutilate themselves. Maybe a scroll would see sticking to single form as mutilation somehow, but it's not like they cut off their arm.
Well, if Gaia felt that way, then why would she stay in the Amelia Clark form the entire time we see her?
Well, some things you do out of safety. I think I can kind of give her that, especially since shape-shifting aliens are all over the news right now.
Yeah, I'm not saying she should be in her scroll form necessarily, but if she feels like one form is mutilation, then why wouldn't she also pick other forms to take?
You asked the question, and I just visualize Amelia Clark looking at the screen going, because they couldn't afford another actor every 45 minutes. In this economy,
because they paid for Amelia Clark, they're getting Amelia Clark.
It served the purpose of saying that Priscilla and Gaia are on the same side, but even still can have nuance between them on what it means to be free, be a scroll, identity, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, and like I kind of said earlier, it shows the difference between a teenager and an adult.
That's true.
Guy is very much the young, we want it and we want it now. We should have it exactly our way. And Priscilla's like, yeah, of course you think that. You're a teenager. You think you know everything. Just wait until you're in a relationship and see what kind of sacrifices you're willing to make when you are actually there, rather than judging me from your inexperienced eyes.
Can we say that Gaia was at least as old as Monica in Captain Marvel?
Well, scrolls live a lot longer. We
Yeah.
don't know
No,
their exact.
what I'm trying to say is the line where she's like, she calls Gaia a teenager, to me sort of is an offhand remark that Gaia really is only like 10 years old in 1995, and that her father is like 140 or something.
Right.
And that could mean Priscilla is of equal age as Talos. And so she knows better. She's got way more wisdom on it. And
Yeah.
literally, Gaia is 38.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know Gaia's exact age, but in terms of scroll age, it's obvious that she is much younger than most of the adults that we're seeing in the show. Her father, Vara.
Which explains why the adults really just have no quibbles about calling her out for being a kid.
Yeah.
Because, I find as I get into a more advanced age, the number of cares I give about people exiting my sphere is quite diminished. Just like, save us both the time of working around each other. Just, are you here or are you not? Because I don't have time for this.
Yeah, agreed. What did you think of the action scene here with Gaia and Vara fighting off the Skrulls?
It was an immediate juxtaposition in their relationship from two people who didn't seem to be in sync and even may have been at odds in a moment. I mean, they got along pretty well for the funeral scene, and yeah, they're kind of aligned with each other on, the good guys, if I was going to give a binary to good and bad here.
Mm-hmm.
But that is immediately lost when the shots ring out. They take cover. She gets her go bags, and immediately they both put them on, and effortlessly, flawlessly, as if she was trained. And maybe she hung out here before the whole graphic thing happened, and that's why she knows this so well. But just flawlessly in sync with each other. Priscilla has a handgun and is just a marksman with it, if that contributes to any ideas of her true age, taking on expert SWAT people. Well, maybe not expert SWAT people, but Skrull operatives with good training. And in the same fluid motions, Gaia just spins a shotgun off her shoulder and starts pumping bad guys full of rock salt and well, maybe more than rock salt, but
yeah, they're not ghosts.
Well, I was thinking Kill Bill.
Oh, I was thinking
like a bitch.
I was thinking Supernatural.
There you go. But yeah, it definitely shows a sudden and immediate harmony in Skrulls under pressure, allying here immediately, no questions asked, no quibbles. They don't even banter. I don't think there's a word spoken between the two of them. They're aiming and they're wagon wheeling around each other to protect, defend, get the angle on the shot they need to take, kind of thing. And it's executed perfectly.
Yeah, agreed. They had a little bit of quipping towards the very end there, but yeah, the most of the scene is without dialogue and just doing what needs to be done as quickly and efficiently as possible.
There's even a scene where it's like they're counting bullets for each other too, because there's a sequence where Gaia takes like 3 or 4 shots with a shotgun and they are sort of pivoting around each other in a very elegant dance of combat. But in the moment where she realizes she's out of ammo on the shotgun, she pivots around Priscilla. Priscilla takes a more central stance instead of a radial stance in this circle between them. And Gaia goes down and reloads the shotgun. Meanwhile, Priscilla is expert marksman here, taking the angles that she needs to cover Gaia.
Yeah.
In what is basically an open room, best you can.
Like a greenhouse or something. It was an interesting little room that they were in.
And then in the very next sequence, Gaia's up with the shotgun, and Priscilla is reloading her handgun.
Yeah, it was fun action scene.
It also shows like Gravik was trying very hard not to underestimate Priscilla, but he doesn't know that Gaia lived and was definitely not expecting her to be there.
Yeah.
And still isn't.
Yeah.
One more reason why I think we're going to see Mendelssohn at the very least again.
Well, yeah, that's a good question whether she'll show up as pretending to be Talos or if she'll show up as herself.
I definitely think the line that she says where she'll put on a good face means
She'll be
she'll show up. I'm leaning to Talos because there's a poetry there, like father, like daughter,
Mhm.
of her showing up as Talos, getting the upper hand on him, and then literally just eviscerating him as herself. And maybe even as herself as a scroll on television, fighting the fight against the Super Scroll Gravik. But you will also get to see what powers Gaia took.
Yeah. We're going to get hot Super Scroll on Super Scroll action in this last episode, definitely.
Oh, the innuendos.
Meanwhile, back to Fury.
What do you mean Fury? This is just a Finnish airport with some weird old guy who looks a little bit like Christopher Plummer.
I mean, it was Fury, obviously, from the very beginning.
Just like, awkward enough to
not
be Chris Plummer. Honestly, the actor reminds me of the albino from a DS9 third season episode, Blood Oath.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You want to get a name on the guy?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, we got a name when he was going into the air when he was at the airport. She says, welcome back, Mr.
Like Finonder or something.
Yeah. Finnish man. I assume that's him. Played by Simon Smith, who has had one role in his life as Finnish man. In Secret Invasion.
Finnish man sounds like a really good name for a supervillain. All right. So he's done nothing except be Nick Fury as someone else.
Awkwardly pretending to be Nick Fury. Yeah, he's got the widow's veil to disguise him, which I like the name for that. And nice little callback to Black Widow using it first. She's the first one we see using it in Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
And then Sonya picks him up and they drive off.
Immediately bantery with each other.
Oh, of course.
She puts on like this hardcore rap. Like, this is what we're doing. And she's like, matter of fact, yes, this is what we're doing.
This is what we're doing. Yes. And we get like literally 2 seconds of Gaia and Vara parting ways, and then back to Fury and Sonya driving. These are the couple of times here at the very end where Sonya is not ahead of Nick, because she helped Rhodey give the information on New Skrullos' location and had no idea that Rhodey was a Skrull.
Why would he even need information from Sonya? He knows where it is.
Yes, Frody knows where it is, but he wants to cover his tracks and be like, he says in the scene with Ritson, I got verification on where it is from Sonya Fallsworth at SIS. And so he wants to cover his tracks, and if Ritson contacts Sonya, she'll say, oh yes, I talked to Rhodey and he needed my help with this. But the fact that she helped him out, and Fury's like, why did you do that? Well, because US and Britain are allies. Last I checked. Well, I checked, Rhodey was a Skrull. Oh.
Whoops.
Well, who the hell isn't a Skrull these days? And we finally get in this car conversation what I had been assuming was the harvest the whole time. We get a concrete definition of what the harvest is. Blood samples of nearly every Avenger, since during the Battle for Earth they all got bloodied at some point. But Fury very carefully cleaned up all of that leftover DNA and, rather than destroying it, stored it somewhere.
Another callback to Fury playing his own game.
Yes, and another task that he gave to his Skrull operatives, a bunch of people who could blend in really well. I got them to collect that DNA under the leadership of Gravik. Gravik was the chief Skrull operative in Operation Harvest, shall we say. Which, mistake. But Fury is just paranoid enough to give Gravik false information as to where the harvest was located. Instead, we find it in Finland here, hidden in yet another Nick Fury gravestone. Sonya asks him why he has, he's like, don't you have another one of those somewhere else? And that doesn't make sense to me. It makes sense hiding it in a gravestone or whatever, but why would you have two Nick Fury gravestones? Why would you have two gravestones that say this is where Colonel Fury was buried?
Well, we know there was one in the US because it was shown at the end of Winter Soldier when they were standing around his grave. So he clearly has more than one.
Well, we establish here that he has more than one. What I'm asking is, why do you want to have more than one? If you wanted to fake your death, why would you have gravestones in multiple locations?
I mean, I got the impression that this was a pretty remote place. And if you're a super secret spy looking for another super secret spy, one of the last line items on your agenda is going to be remote cemetery in the middle of nowhere, Finland.
Fair enough.
But I got this. I also saw, did you get the, I'm going to assume this is a reference to something, and maybe you can help me work it out. I'm assuming that the iconography in the mausoleum, when Fury looks at the stone on the wall, it lights up like a wolf. And I think that's a Howling Commando reference.
Okay.
And I'm going to see that. I'm thinking maybe the other entries in that mausoleum might actually be like some of the fallen Howling Commandos who maybe joined up after World War II or were running an organization at some point, but they all have wolf heads on their stones.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily go that far because unlike in the comics, Nick wasn't part of the Howling Commandos.
I know, that's why I'm like, I think it's just a reference.
So that's why I wouldn't say that the actual commandos were buried next to Nick's fake gravesite. I just saw it as very Finnish Viking iconography there. We're in Finland at this moment, and so I just thought it made sense to use those sorts of visuals. Because I thought I saw, like, runes on some of the chambers that open up that looked like kind of Nordic runes as well. So I just thought it was all kind of part and parcel of that.
I just really want the Howling Commandos to be like an elite unit in S.H.I.E.L.D. that was inspired by Captain America, but Nick Fury had some international relations back in the 70s with former Senator Alexander, what's his name?
Pierce.
Thanks. And I'm going to headcanon for myself that that Nick Fury was a member of the Howling Commandos in the 70s, and that's why it makes sense.
All right. And that's, hey, I could totally go with it. That's where he met Sonya, because we basically said her grandfather was one of the original Howling Commandos. And so maybe her father was a 70s era Howling Commando. So yeah, I accept your headcanon.
Yay. Okay, so we're down to the final episode now, yeah?
Well, we have a couple more moments here that I wanted to talk about, which is Sonya asks why Fury hasn't called in any of his special friends.
Because they're not in the budget, Sonya.
Well, yeah. Do you buy his in-story logic?
No.
Okay. Good.
I mean, it's nice that he's got in-story logic, but man literally waited until his ass was disintegrating before calling in his ace card. Like, you didn't think about this at any point before this? Not when the Psycho robot was threatening to plunge an asteroid into the ground, or when the Psycho Guardian was threatening to invade Earth with aliens? Like, You just saw her fly through a ship, and there's another army coming with a similar kind of ship. We could really use some help now.
Well, then maybe we do buy his explanation. He is the kind of person who wants to do things on his own or in his own way. And so that's why he hasn't called in. And also, who is he going to call? And who is he going to trust and know that they are not a Skrull?
Carol, he already knows Skrulls can't launch photon blasts.
Okay. How long does it take Carol to get here once she's called?
Let me carry the one.
From when he hits the pager to when she shows up.
I mean, okay. They had the pager. The Avengers got the pager.
Yes, which means they spent time finding where Nick's body was and found the pager and brought that back to headquarters.
That could be really reduced by the low-jacking the car that Fury was driving.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, at minimum, couple of days.
Yes, at bare minimum, couple of days. So
how long between the scene in Endgame where Black Widow and Captain America are talking about whales in the Hudson and Carol showing up? Because that's the day that Scott shows up. And then I'm assuming at a minimum to a minimum of hours and a maximum to maybe a day, they go and talk to Tony, get turned down, immediately go talk to Bruce, who goes to the Avengers compound and sets up the time thing with them.
Right.
And right after that, I know it's the next morning because Tony's been working on the whole time travel bit, and he shows up with the shield the next day. And then they spend a montage planning the time heist, which is like maybe 2 or 3 days for planning it. The whole heist in real time takes 5 seconds because they vanish and reappear.
Right.
And then it's maybe a few hours, maybe a day after that to process a little bit of Natasha's death, to assemble the new gauntlet and do the snap. And in that moment, Thanos shows up. So it's like 3 or 4 days before Thanos even shows up. And within an hour on the battlefield, Carol's there?
Yeah, well, she was a little Deus ex machina there.
What are you talking about? She was just an assist. I was hoping that would be a more passing of the torch, because when Thanos went to headbutt Carol, she didn't budge. I was like, yeah, it's time.
Yeah.
We need to level up the game here.
But then the other moment that I wanted to bring up real quick, when Sonya asks why Finland, and Nick says, oh, Priscilla and I honeymooned here, Skrulls like the cold.
And it dawns on Sonya.
Sonya's face there as she's like, oh, I get it now. Again, a wonderful acting job by Olivia Colman this entire time. So I find it interesting that basically all the spies know that Fury had a wife, but none of them knew that she was a Skrull.
Yes. I mean, what was it that Tony said? His secrets have secrets?
There you go.
His secret wife is secretly a Skrull.
Nice callback. So, yeah, Fury gears up, and one last episode to go.
This really has hallmarks of the Western trope of the retired gunslinger called to duty by a threat to village and home.
And usually some sort of personal involvement that calls him out, that forces him to come back. So what do you think? Now, Fury geared back up. He put on the eye patch. He put on the leather trench coat. Do you think he's at full form? Do you think he's been at full form the whole time still? Or are you abandoning that theory of yours?
I'm riding the wave.
All right.
I'm all in and cashing in all of my chips. Yeah, no, I think Fury's been waiting for this moment. I don't think it was planned necessarily from the beginning, but when things started getting rough, he started identifying safe havens for himself, this among them. And since it's probably the closest one to Skrullos, it makes sense for him to come here, and he's brought the next best asset he could with him.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
and the fact that he still had secrets from her just sort of narratively speaks to him being still a few steps ahead.
Although he didn't know, at least he didn't seem to know, Gravik's plan of starting World War III with the Skrullos reveal. And Gravik specifically calls him out on that. So we'll see. We've been a little bit more negative on this episode than on the previous 4. I've said before, Marvel seems to have some trouble making the landing.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Well, on that note, there's just one more deep dive episode left. Hopefully, we can end on a high note. I'd love to hear from any of you listening, whether about the Secret Invasion show or topics you want covered in future episodes. Just send an email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome to Geektown, Twitter @Geektown Podcast, Mastodon @Welcome to Geektown @mastodon.social, and now Blue Sky @Welcome to Geektown @bluesky.social. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, why not become a patron at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, which includes the unedited conversations for each of these deep dives, and a monthly shout-out. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them,
Welcome to Geektown. Population, us.
Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All of their sound clips are the copyrighted material, their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.